Done. Now I entered my username and password. My connection is complete. It requires 5 properties to connect to the database. Now this is over with the connection. Now I want to disable the auto commit mode. Now why I'm going to do that? Basically, for running the program, this is enough. You just need to connect to the database and then you can do whatever you want. And you need to have one more thing called transaction that you need to declare, but the connection is this much. Now another thing I'm going to do here is I want to disable my auto commit mode. Why am I going to do that? Imagine in a program or in a class or in a transaction, I have some transactions or some more than one SQL query running. I'm saying SQL query, but imagine I have more than one updation on my database going on. For example, I have a program called transfer.class or something like that, in which I remove 100 I remove money from my account and transfer it to my friend's account. Simple. So what I'm doing here is, for example, alright, I have my account and my friend's account. Imagine I have $1,000 in my account. Alright, I have 1,000 and my friend has 500. Okay, 500. Now when I'm transferring money from my account to his account, first thing, imagine I want to transfer $100 from my account to my friend's account. So imagine the first query that we run is to remove $100 from my account, so my account becomes 900, and the second query that runs is to increase amount, to add amount in his account, 600. Now suppose I have auto commit enabled. What happens if, for example, for some reason this was 1,000 before, now my $100 get deducted and his is 500. Now $100 are deducted from my account and they're supposed to be added to my friend's account, but as it is auto committed, when the amount 100 got deducted from my account, alright, it's committed, so this is final, this won't change. Now that money have to be added to my friend's account, that's Deepak's account. Now due to some circumstances this did not work. The money did not get added to my friend's account. There was some error, some server error or some kind of error. Now what happens? It's auto committed, so I won't get my money back, he won't get his amount updated, and that money is lost. So that's why generally we commit both transactions together. That is, after the 900 money have been removed and the amount have been added in one single query, we will commit it. That's the point. So for that reason, generally it's a good practice to set auto commit false or auto commit disabled. Now I'm writing what we need to do to do it, set it disabled. Auto commit false. This is the comment, don't be mistake. Alright, so I have again property name. So see, this hibernate.properties file contains everything you need to write the hibernate.configuration file. It has everything. For example, now I'm doing the auto commit thing. So I want to search what am I supposed to, what's the property which I'm going to use to disable the auto commit. I press Ctrl F. Alright, auto commit, and find it. See, here it is. Hibernate.connection.autocommit is true. This is a property name, this is a property value. So I'm going to use this property name, copy and paste it here, and I'm going to set this to false. Alright, done. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, for explaining you people, alright, sorry, alright, for explaining you guys how Hibernate generates or how Hibernate creates the SQL query by itself using the 10G dialect, I'm going to write few properties which are going to enable us to see the SQL statement generated by the Hibernate framework in our console when we run the program. Alright, so for that, to display SQL query generated when running the program, I need few lines, property names and property values. You can search them up in the hibernate.properties file, but I'll type it down. First one, show underscore SQL value true. That's very easy. Now the SQL generated query which will be shown now, I want it to be formatted, that is in a proper format. So for that I use property name and I use format underscore SQL and I'm setting it to true. Now next one, property, I want it to display comments while showing me the SQL query. So for that I use underscore SQL underscore comments and set it to true. Finished. These three SQL properties you need to display the SQL. Actually you need only one. These two are not necessary to display the SQL query in our console. Now next thing I'm going to do is I have to actually write the JDBC transaction query. So I have to use a property for JDBC transaction. So what is it going to be? Now there is something called JDBC transaction, as everybody have been hearing it out. So for that we'll use some property. Alright, now continuing, I need to configure my JDBC transaction. So for that I need to write using for JDBC transaction. This is a command, and I have to use again property name, and you can search this up in the .properties file. And right now I know the name, so I'm going to type it down. Hibernate dot transaction dot factory underscore class, and its value going to be org dot hibernate dot transaction dot JDBC capital transaction factory capital transaction and factory. Now finished. Now the simple understanding of how does the Hibernate framework works is we have a class, a Java. You know, every class have some variables and some methods. Now what we do is we have these columns and this is our table name. So we use a similar structure to define a class. That's actually the bean class, and in Hibernate we call it the Pojo class. So I'll be calling that class which is used the Pojo class. Plain old Java object, which Pojo stands for. So the plain old Java object class actually is having kind of similar structure to this table which we are going to use. What it does is, as a table name we have the class name, and for the ID column names we have the variables. Like for ID we may have a variable with some name which is of type integer, and ename of type string, and mobile of type string or integer long, email of type string. So what we do is we map this columns are in our database to the variables in our class. So for that we have to write somewhere that employee table is mapped to some particular class, ID column is mapped actually we do it in the reverse way. We map the class to the table and we map the variables to the columns. So we have some class, imagine we have some employee class. So employee class is mapped to employee table. We have to write somewhere that employee class is mapped to employee table, and the variable employee class is having the ID variable of integer type is mapped to the ID column of the employee table, and so on. Now this mapping is done in one more XML file called the mapping file, the Hibernate mapping file. And in the configuration file we have to write where the mapping file is available, or what is the name of the mapping file which we are going to use. So for that purpose we need to actually write the mapping file. So mapping file, I want to write a comment, mapping file. Now this is for mapping file. Property name, I did a mistake, it's not property, it's mapping, and then I have to use something called resource, and here in this I have to write the mapping file. What's the name of my mapping file? Since for now we have not generated a mapping file, I'll write it when I generate the mapping file. Alright, so with this our configuration file is done. That is, the thing we need to connect to our database is done. Now let's move on. Now the next thing we need is, for writing the program, is we need the class to map these columns. So let's create a class, create new a class with the name employee class, and it's not going to contain any main method, so just finish it. So I have the employee class. Now the Pojo class, or the class which we use to map to our database, must implement serializable. Why? Because we may have multiple sessions, and we know a serializable object can run in multiple threads. So we may have more than one session or a program which we may write, or if you're writing a program which is run by many users, then it may have multiple sessions. For that purpose we have to or must implement it to be serializable. Now next thing, now let's create the variables. Int, the first one is the ID, so I'm going to create int ID, it's private int ID. Then I'm going to create private string name or ename name. Just let me check. There is ename mobile email. Alright, private string name, then mobile private long mobile, and then private string email. Done. Now the Pojo class, the class which we are going to use for mapping, should have an empty constructor defined in itself. So let's define an empty constructor. Public employee, and is going to be empty. Finished. Now let's write setter and getter methods for these four variables. Right click, source, generate getters and setters for all these four.